The Atreides
The
family
Atreides
have
family have finally
arrived
arrived
at
at
Arrakis.
Arrakis.
This is where
This
they get
is
to
where they get
meet,
to meet,
well, the
well,
Freemen.
the
They get to
Freemen. They
meet a
get to
whole
meet
bunch
a whole bunch
of the
of
people
the
on
people on
Arrakis.
Arrakis.
But now that they've
But now that they've
arrived,
arrived,
there's an attempt
there's
on
an
Paul's
attempt on
life.
Paul's life.
And what's he
And
gonna
what's
do?
he going to do?
We'll talk about
We'll
it.
talk about it.
Okay, welcome back. We are covering Dune by Frank Herbert. My name is Chris.
I'm Chip.
I'm Brian.
I'm John.
And we are the doctors who read stuff. John, this is your second episode back with us, so thank you for joining us again.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, in the last episode we did, we talked a lot about how Paul was just like gaining information about Arrakis, the storms, the Fremen, where they were going to be, the myth and the myths and the legends that point supposedly to him being this chosen one. And now we're actually on the planet.
I think it's interesting how quickly, it's just we kind of have this scene with Paul and Yueh and the Duke, and then they prepare for the crossing, and now here they are. So now we're to Lady Jessica just doing some unpacking. We meet a pretty important character early on here with the Shadout Mapes.
Yes, and everybody should remember her from Kindergarten Cop.
The Dune, or the...
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
And I think it's interesting how they established city Fremen and desert
Yeah.
Fremen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's a good point. And
Yeah.
this whole exchange with Jessica and Mapes is kind of like this cat and mouse game almost.
Right.
'Cause-
It's a really uneasy first
and
encounter.
and it's interesting because Mapes is clearly trying to determine if Jessica is basically the one that they're waiting for, or if she's a danger. And if she's not the one, then it sounds like one of them's not going to make it out of the room. But
The Chris
They're
knife
both
was meant
testing each
for
other.
yeah,
one of them.
Yeah.
and the whole thing with the Chris knife is interesting. Now, when I read that, what I was wondering, as she was kind of like going through like the dialects, and it's like, okay, the knife would be maker of death, and is that just her knowledge, or is she actually like diving into like ancestral memories there?
I think it's just the knowledge they've learned from Toofer and everybody else about the Chris knife and how it's the tooth of a sandworm and it's the Fremen weapon of choice. I don't think it's from a past memory.
Okay, that was just something as I was reading. I was like, well,
Yeah.
it could be, but they don't explicitly say that, and I think if it was, they might make that known.
That scene gets really deep where they're both going back and forth, and it gets a little like who's challenging who right now. And yeah.
The entire time, Jessica is trying to figure out which bedroom she's going to live in because the first one she saw wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
Like I found that the humor in that was pretty great because when you moved into a new house as a kid, you'd always argue on which sibling was going to get the bedroom of choice, and so
And there's it's our first interaction where we have Leto and Jessica like interacting with each other. And you kind of get the idea up till this point that Leto is kind of this gallant,
stoic,
like almost like this thing that like this, like he's on this pedestal that Paul's trying to be. But he's let's see, as on his way out, Jessica's observation was, his voice sounded once from there, commanding and disdainful, the way he always spoke to servants when he was in a hurry. So you get the impression that there's this other side, and it does pop in later she says that too when she's talking to Yueh. So
Yeah.
that was just kind of interesting to me.
Yeah. I found it interesting with the choosing of the room, the excess that the Atreides and the Harkonnens before them, just completely oblivious to like the waste of water, how they don't wear still suits when they're talking about the dates, and the date is like 40
the date.
men, and yeah,
Yeah.
that's that. I just thought that was so interesting about how they treat Dune versus how the people who live on Dune think of it.
Mhm.
And that the Fremen were rioting until the Duke was like, no, we'll bring equipment to make up for the extra men.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. The water is so important. It's currency,
Yeah.
and they're just wasteful. And we
So are we.
yeah,
That's reiterated a lot in this chapter.
It is.
The whole
Yeah.
water. It is throughout the
Right.
book, but it's really just reinforcing that through
Right.
this discussion.
Yeah, and the one thing that so Mapes comes to the realization, is like, okay, Jessica's the one, and as she's leaving, Mapes is like, she is the one, and then she follows up with poor thing. It's like, so even the Fremen know that Atreides are screwed from the get-go here.
Because the Fremen are a wild card right now. It's like they're not allied to anyone. They could choose any side and completely change the course of Arrakis.
Well, and at this point, they still don't know how many there are. So the Harkonnens, dramatically underestimated their numbers.
Right.
The Atreides seem to think, there's more of them there than we think, but they still don't know the numbers of Fremen that are on the planet. So.
And they're at least trying to make an effort by like sending Duncan ahead to meet with
got
them.
some emissaries and
like overtures of peace and make an alliance.
Because they know if they're with the Atreides, then they have a better chance of surviving whatever trap they know they're walking into.
Well, it's kind of the governmental dichotomy of like the Harkonnens just went in and did whatever the heck they wanted to do, and that kind of some Eastern power or Western powers do that, and then you have other Western powers like, we're going to come in and we're going to work with you, and so if you look at the Cold War of the time, that's very two different fronts.
Yeah,
and it's interesting how relevant that still is today. Even as it was in 1965 when this was written.
Right.
50 years later, it's still pretty relevant. More than 50 years later, but
well, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So.
Yeah, meet the new boss. Same as the old boss.
But so Jessica leaves like the dining hall or the entrance hall or wherever she was, and she goes.
Yeah. Wasn't that way? Yeah, because it was the dining hall because they were determining where to put the bull and Leto's father's portrait, wasn't it?
Head,
that's right.
It's clear that Jessica does not care for the portrait.
No.
She did not like him, I think.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting though that the Shadout wanted to clean off the horns on the bull, but it was the dried blood of the former Duke.
No, keep that.
Yeah.
So, but the disdain for the portrait kind of plays in later because Jessica goes to visit Yueh. Well, she's looking for Paul, but Yueh said no, he's sleeping, and so they have this conversation and. Like Yueh's.
Yeah, I think this is where we learn that Yueh's wife was a Bene Gesserit as well.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And that there's some, that Jessica seems to remind him of her.
He might have said something.
Well, that's when he's trying to throw her off by calling her Jessica by accident rather than
my lady.
That's
right.
Yeah.
And then he's like, I did it on purpose so that she would think that I'm just because a Bene Gesserit can read your.
Yeah, so he's almost. And it's just part of his imperial conditioning that his mind is very strong in ways to, that he can fool her by.
Yeah, she thinks that he's upset now because he called her by her first name rather than the fact that he's trying to kill them all.
Yeah, because she's basically realizing how much he hates the Harkonnens through this and through that behavior.
Yeah.
So there was something interesting though in their conversation. They were talking about water on Arrakis, and they mentioned that. You drill a well and you get a few drops of water, and then it goes dry. And then you could drill one like 3 feet away, and the same thing would happen, and no water ever comes out of them after you drill them, and they go dry. So I don't remember, but I feel like that's something to hold on to because it's probably going to play into.
Well, and this is where they introduce all the date palm, the trees that are in the courtyard or whatever, and that they take 40 liters of water a day.
Yeah.
Which I forget how many people that could.
I think was it 5?
Each person uses 8 liters of water, so 5.
So that's 5 men per tree, and there's 20 trees,
Math.
and
I don't
There we
do
go.
math.
I can do math.
No.
yeah. But just talking about how wasteful some of that stuff is. It's there for show more than anything, and
right.
Or the opulence of the palace.
The style over substance, and
right.
Yeah, and all of that, like with the water, comes into play with the Fremen, because to them they have a different goal.
Water is life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Living in the deep desert's very different than living in Arrakeen.
Right.
Yeah.
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 But the Yueh actually asks why she never made the Duke marry her. And I thought it was interesting how he phrased that question. It's like, because he almost phrases it like, as a Bene Gesserit, she could alter his will, almost, right?
She could use her Bene Gesserit and the voice and make him, because she's just a consort. Right. She was actually bought for the Duke. Yeah,
she's a don't they use concubine? Isn't that the
concubine?
Yeah. Yep.
Because they didn't want to marry because they could always use his and this comes up much later. They want to use his ability to marry somebody for politics rather than love.
They actually,
which is a very feudal medieval
time. They actually say it in this chapter.
Yeah,
and
they do.
Well, she says that there's good political reason for her not to marry him, and as long as my Duke remains unmarried, some of the great houses can still hope for an alliance.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
he's a cousin to the emperor, therefore his brothers. Yeah.
And he's kind of a catch, apparently. So.
Well, he's got that hawk nose that's described every time he introduced him.
Yeah.
But this is where Jessica says the Duke is really 2 men. One is charming, witty, considerate, and tender, and the other is cold, callous, demanding, selfish, and as harsh and cruel as the winter wind.
Ooh.
And she said that's the man that was shaped by his father, that second one. So then you're like, no wonder she had that reaction to the portrait back in the dining room. So, and it kind of fits in with how he snapped at the servants on his way out earlier. So it's like this idyllic vision that you're almost given from Paul's perspective. You're like, oh, that's maybe not really true.
Well, it's how kids see their dad.
Absolutely.
Or how they, you see your parent. Yeah. And then you eventually come to realize that they have faults as well.
Yeah. Well, some of us do.
Some of us.
I have quite a few, but
my children will never know. No.
Don't ask me about my kids right now. So.
And then,
but
one of them's doing good, so we'll say.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'm batting 500.
There you go.
Hey, that's a $1 million contract in the MLB.
That's true.
Yeah.
Point.
No, I think Leto's a very interesting character about how they play up his two sides and what Jessica sees, and then what Yueh sees, and what Mapes sees, and what Paul sees. So
yeah. And then when Yueh leaves, we find out, John, I think you mentioned this earlier, but Jessica knows that he's hiding something. She does not suspect it's anything nefarious, but she knows that there's something that he's not being truthful with. So,
well, doesn't she think it goes back to his dead wife? Or I thought that she kind of thinks it's something there, like a guilt or something that.
I don't think she thinks he's a traitor, but she thinks that there's something wrong with him. But she doesn't think his conditioning can be broken. That's the thing, is there's so much trust in the Bene Gesserit and the guild, and that training can't be broken. That they place too much faith in it, and that will all crumble later.
So she thinks to herself, all this time we talked, he was hiding something, holding something back. To save my feelings,
Mm-hmm.
no doubt. He's a good man. She hesitated, almost turned back to confront Yueh and drag the hidden thing from him. But that would only shame him, frighten him to learn he's so easily read. I should place more trust in my friends. Well...
It almost felt like he was talking about the marriage. Like, does she think that Leto's going to be marrying or something with the relationship rather than his traitorism?
Yeah.
Is that a word?
Yeah,
I'm going to use
works.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he did kind of lead her down that avenue, obviously, so that we, the readers, would know about their relationship, but also
Mm-hmm.
opens that up.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all this time, this conversation's taking place. We have Paul in the other room who's supposed to be asleep, but it turns out he's not. He
No.
wants to explore because he's what is he, 15?
15.
Yes,
Yeah.
6, yeah.
And it's kind of interesting. You know, he's like, haha, I palmed the sleeping pill that Yueh gave me. He never knew, and clearly Yueh didn't know, which should probably speak to Paul's abilities as far as deception goes, because Yueh is probably pretty observant.
You would think so.
But Herbert really wastes no time in presenting the threat here with the hunter-seeker.
Yeah, because I think Paul kind of, he gets up and he wants to go explore. So he's kind of listening to see, when Yueh and his mother kind of leave the area. Because I think he says he can hear them through the door, but they're, it's kind of an indistinct. He can't make out what they're talking about. A little bit about the Harkonnens, a little bit about the spice, but he's basically waiting for them so that he can go leave and explore the castle or the palace. But and he's been told not to, basically, that it's still too dangerous, and we kind of find out that it is a little too dangerous here.
So the hunter-seeker is interesting to me, right? It's this little floating projectile of death.
Looks like a syringe in the movie, but they talk about it more like a metal thing that's going to burrow into your first major organ that it finds, and
yeah, and it's
so you can't move.
And it's piloted by somebody nearby, because I don't think they kind of hint that the range on it can't be that far, so it has to be someone near to what's going on.
Well, and
that's gonna.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say that's gonna lead to, you already have Jessica questioning Twofer, and then this going on, so
plots within plots. Because you have Yueh, who's embedded, and now you also have another threat somewhere in there to raise suspicion in other places. So,
And so basically, the hunter-seeker comes out of a kind of a hatch, like near the bed where the controls to the room are.
Yeah.
And so in the room is still dark because he was supposed to be asleep, but he didn't have his shield belt on, so the shield belt's on the bed. Paul notices this thing come out, and he notices that it's cued based on movement, so he goes completely still. So he's relying on a lot of his training already, here in, barely not even 100 pages into the book, and he's relying on a lot of the training that he's received from Gurney, from Duncan, from everybody else. But he's watching this thing, and he knows that if he moves, he's pretty much dead. He's going to have to react quickly. So there's a lot of suspense built up, and I think this is a pretty short chapter. It's only 5 or 6 pages, not even. And
it also shows that he's able to do something that other people can't do by defeating it.
Yeah.
Building that myth still,
Yeah.
Yeah, because so basically it just comes to, the door starts to open, the thing moves, he's able to grab it and drive it into like the steel plate on the door, disabling it, but he still maintains his grasp. He doesn't let go of it until like the very end of the chapter.
Right.
But then he gets to meet the Shadout Mapes. So
right.
And it's interesting that she's the one who witnesses that, because then she can go to the Fremen and say he might be the one as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting the things that she says. So she calls him a manling, which I thought was funny. And just the way she words some things. It's like, I must cleanse the way between us. And you've put a water burden on me. And then she says...
Okay, I couldn't remember what she called it. I knew it was it's almost like the Wookiee life debt, that...
And then she says... there are black debts and white debts.
Yeah.
So no explanation, but there they are. And then she says his mother's in the weirding room. So those were just some things I
Yeah, but
picked
she
out of that,
also
and I was like,
Yeah.
did Paul know of a traitor in their midst until now? I couldn't remember if 'cause I thought that there's been talk of a traitor at some point, but I don't know who knows
I
on
think
the
he'd been
Atreides
kept
side.
blind about it.
Because when she tells him straight up that, yeah, there's a traitor
Yeah.
in your midst, and that traitor was probably controlling this hunter seeker, just so you know. But,
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, but I think then it says, yeah, so Paul absorbed this in silence, a traitor. Before he could speak, the odd woman whirled away and ran back toward the entry.
Yeah. So, and after she left, it says Paul paused for the pneumatic blink that would store the pattern of her face in his memory. He attached the label Shadout Mapes. So that almost sounds like a mentat technique to me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They also never say why she's there. Why did she choose to come? Did she know what was going on, or
She didn't.
Mm.
She didn't
just
seem
kind of
surprised.
no, like she almost knew she needed to
Yeah.
go in.
Well,
So,
what she said was she was there because his father had sent for him. So I don't know if she was
oh,
sent
okay,
to get him, but it was,
yeah,
she wasn't surprised at what happened. She was kind
no,
of more like, "Oh, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
no.
That thing would have killed me."
Or damn it, now I have to give you some water.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now I must cleanse the way between us
Okay.
yeah.
before I go meet Arnold Schwarzenegger in Kindergarten Cop.
Get out of here. Go.
Yeah.
Speaking of getting out of here and going.
John. Is that when he's John
Yes.
Kimball?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Detective Kimball. Yeah, sorry.
My water's out.
I don't know you, a water dad or water burden.
So, next time we will be covering the following 3 sections of the book. So we will get to meet Duncan, Idaho, and I think we might get to meet Keynes, the ecologist, as well. So there will be details on the sections below if you are following along with us, so check those out in the description. If you enjoyed our conversation, please click the like button. You can also sign up for notifications if you subscribe so that you can be notified whenever we post new content. And we do bring you new content every Wednesdays, so keep checking back. And we will see you next time. John, thank you for joining us. And very quickly, we want to say thank you to Nick Eimerman at Neimerman Design Company for providing our logo, our graphics, and all of the things that make this show look awesome. So we'll see you next time.
Alongzi.